Well, listen, today I want to talk about one thing can be summed up in kind of one phrase, two words, and that is this: long run. Long run. How many of you, besides Maria, have heard of Dean Karnazes? Anybody ever hear of him? Let me tell you the Dean Karnazes. Oh, yeah, you too, Marty, right? The Dean Karnazes story. Let me tell you his story. When he was 30 years old, he lived in San Francisco, and one night he went out bar hopping, and he went from, that night, it says in Wired magazine, he went from beer to tequila, and he was out all night long kind of drinking alone. And by the end of the evening, Wired magazine said it like this, put it this way: by the end of the evening, he was slobbering drunk and completely disgusted with himself. He wanted to change. How many of you can relate to wanting to change? I just wanting to change. I don't want to be this way anymore. And he longed for it, but to no avail. So he walked home to his house. He lived in San Francisco. Remember that. And when he got to his house, he looked down on his porch, as the story goes, and he saw an unused pair of running shoes that had been sitting on his front porch for a long time. He even said they were a bit moldy. And so he lived in San Francisco, so he decided right then when he got home that he'd go on a jog south. So the next morning he called his wife to pick him up, and he was in Santa Cruz, which is about 70 plus miles away from San Francisco. Now it's amazing, after spending a night like that he was able to run that far. And he said it was that day that his life began to change. This is how he put it: it was like I had a religious conversion. Now, Dean ended up being, Maria even said she met him, he ended up being probably the greatest ultra-marathon runners in American history. For example, one summer, listen to this, he decided, you put that book up there, and he wrote a book about it. One summer he ran 50 marathons in 50 consecutive days in 50 different states. It's pretty impressive, isn't it? Just absolutely amazing. And listen to this. One summer he ran the New York City Marathon, where he placed pretty high in it. And afterwards, he decided to run home. Now, where did I tell you he lived? San Francisco. So he ran home from New York to San Francisco. Absolutely amazing. So naturally, people have asked him I might remember Forrest Gump, the movie, right? And people were following him and wanted to know what he had to say. Well, it's kind of like a real life Forrest Gump, and ask him what he learned from all his experience in ultra running. And so this is a quote from Wired magazine. You'll see it up behind me. He said, "Somewhere along the line, we seem to have confused comfort with happiness. Any goal worth achieving involves an element of risk and pain." Just leave that up there for a minute. We've confused comfort with happiness. Now, to me, it's a great definition for us as we continue our series with moving toward faith. So if you have your message notes, grab those, pull those out. We're continuing with our series in Hebrews chapter 11. Now, the reason why we're doing this is to help us build up our faith in a time when it seems like everybody is kind of losing hope and losing faith. And today we look at the story of Moses. That's found in chapter 11 of Hebrews, verses 23 through 29. Now, I hope that you're kind of reading along. I hope that maybe you got your Bible out and dusted it off, and you started reading Hebrews chapter 11, and maybe that encouraged you to go back and read the story of Moses, which you probably all know the story of Moses. I'm going to recount it a little bit today. Maybe not from reading it, maybe from watching it on TV, but we're still kind of go through that a little bit today. I think one thing, we really need this message today, at least I do, because it seems like everybody's just so tired, so kind of worn out and fatigued at life. Listen to this. I was reading some statistics recently. So I read that there's a percentage of people that are quitting their jobs right now is higher than it's ever been. People quitting their jobs higher than it's ever been. This would amaze me. A percentage of pastors that say they want to quit Pastoring is higher than it's ever been. It says as high as 60%. Also, a number of people have left the church, have given up. And the amount of people that have left and probably won't return is higher than ever before. This time in history has been called the era of giving up. And surprisingly to me, at least it was to me, maybe it's not to you, the age demographic that's been hit the most is ages 20 to 24 years old. So listen, before we kind of jump in to this, let's just recap again, because I know some people are in and out, they're not here. Let's recap again. The book of Hebrews was written to followers of Jesus, and they were predominantly Jewish followers who were excited about the faith, who started strong. They were full of hope, right? And they were expecting the return of Jesus like imminent, just any day, maybe next week. And they were so excited. Then weeks turned into months, and months turned into years into decades, and they were losing hope. They were just tired of waiting. Listen to me. They were tired of waiting for better things to come. Anybody get that feeling? Just so tired. Like you want better things, but you get tired of waiting for those things. They had put their hope and trust in Jesus, and everything they thought about just wasn't panning out. And they were being persecuted to a level that was never before. They were being ostracized. They were suffering. And they were thinking very seriously about quitting. And so this writer, who we don't know who it is, writes this letter to this group of people. We call it Hebrews, giving them reason to carry on. What a great book for us to be reading right now, isn't it? What a great chapter for us to be in right now, because things aren't seem to be going the way we thought they might go. And so he gives them reasons to endure by doing this, by telling them stories from their own past. Now, one thing you have to remember about reading the Bible, I was talking to Steve about this week, and we get confused about this sometimes, is that sometimes we hear the Bible talk about something, and we take it as if the Bible's talking to us, right? The Bible is not written to you and I, just so you know that. It's not written to us. It's written for us, but not to us. That's an important thing to remember. And so this letter was written to this group of people who were experiencing a lot of trials. They wanted to give up. And so Moses tells them these stories. Remember, we started about how faith thinks. We talked about Abel. We talked about Enoch. Then we talked about how faith acts. We talked about Abraham and Sarah. And so today we're going to look at the secrets of endurance, how faith endures. And we're going to be looking at the life of Moses. Now, so we're going to do two different things today. We're going to look at, number one, this is important for us to look at, and that's why I think these stories are in there. We're going to look at what Moses endured. And the reason why I think it's there, and the reason why we're going to look at it, is so you can relate. You can say, wow, like I get it. Moses had to endure some pretty difficult things. Maybe you feel that way. You've had to endure some difficult things in your life. And so we see this picture of Moses, and we read about it, and we go, wow, I kind of get that a little bit, right? I feel what he went through. And second, we're going to look at this. So what he endured, and then we're going to look at how he endured. And it's right there all in these scriptures. So 5 times in these verses, we see it says this: by faith, Moses. By faith, Moses. Now, and these 5 times where it says by faith, Moses, revolve around 5 crises in Moses' life. And it all started in childhood. So in your notes, grab your notes there. The first thing is this: Moses experienced childhood trauma. By faith, now just pay attention to this. It says this: by faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born, because they saw he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. Now, there's all different things we can talk about in here. One of the things that I really kind of, I looked at this and I thought, wow, this could really screw somebody up, right? And that's this. I'm not going to talk about it, but just think about it for a minute. And because they saw he was no ordinary child. Have you ever met parents when, their kid is like, 2 weeks old, spitting up, drooling, can't hold his head, and they're going to be some prodigy at something, right? And put all these expectations on a child, and that's difficult, isn't it? Difficult to live up to those kind of things. So that's one thing. I'm not even going to talk about that one. But it says this, his parents hid him. The original readers of this would have been like, oh yeah, like we know that story. I get that story. Like I know it, right? And they said it's a great story. But if you're new to all this Bible stuff, maybe you don't know. Let me just talk about it for a little bit. So it says this, they hid him, they were afraid of the king's edict. The king's edict. What's a king's edict anyway? What were they afraid of? So 3,500 years ago, the Israelites found themselves, they were slaves in Egypt. Now, their numbers were getting so big that Pharaoh started to worry about kind of a rebellion, right? Their numbers are getting so great. And so Pharaoh at that time was concerned about their numbers. So his edict was that every male-born child would be killed, would be drowned in the Nile River. So Moses' parents respond by making a basket, and they line it with pitch, and they take it down among the bulrushes. Bulrushes were like these sort of reeds. As a matter of fact, what they used to take and make papyrus out of for writing on. And they hid him down there. Now, you may think, they hid him down there and they brought him home. No, they probably hid him down there and just went down there and took care of him down there for 3 months. Talk about childhood trauma. I know someone was telling me it was my friend in Ohio. His wife goes to Central America somewhere in these orphanages, and Michelle and I saw it in Africa where these kids are just put there. Sometimes as babies, they're abandoned because maybe there's a problem with them or something like that, and they don't want to deal with it or they can't. And so these babies are there, and so people go and just to hold those babies, because what we know now is how important it is to be held and to be loved and to be touched in those times, right? And so it says Moses for 3 months was hid among the bulrushes. Now, there's a plot twist, right? Pharaoh's daughter goes down by the river to bathe, and she finds the basket, and she takes the baby home to the palace, and she raises the baby as her own. And so Moses grows up in the palace as Pharaoh's grandson. And another plot twist, you may know this, his mother ends up being the nanny for him. They end up finding a Hebrew woman to be the nanny, and they find her. And so his mother now is the nanny as he's growing up thinking Pharaoh's daughter. He's the prince of Egypt, and Pharaoh's daughter is his mother. And at some point, Moses is going to find out the truth. In Acts 7:23, we find that Stephen's telling this story, this narrative, and Stephen talks about him being about 40 years old. And when this happens, he goes through a serious, and that's number 2, a serious identity crisis. Identity crisis. Moses, guess what? You're not really Pharaoh's grandson. What? I'm not? No. In fact, you're not even Egyptian. What? What are you talking about? I'm not Egyptian. No. And that lady right there, Pharaoh's daughter, that's not your mom. It's not? No. And the nanny that took care of you? Yeah, I remember her. That was your mother. Now, could you imagine if you had to learn this when you're 40 years old? Everything you thought about yourself to be true wasn't true. As a matter of fact, Moses, you're part of this low caste. You're part of this group of people who are the lowest of the lowest. They're slaves. Moses, what's he going to do with all that information? Listen, it says this. By faith, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated with the people of God rather than enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. Now, let's pause here for a minute. Said it'd rather be regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ. What's going on here? I thought Moses lived 3,500 years before Christ. It's true, isn't it? Right? But what we learn when we read the New Testament is that Christ, the eternal Word, has always been. We read that in the beginning was the what? The Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, I want to pick up a few things in here. It says this. It says that the treasures of Egypt. Sometimes we can just pass over these things and kind of gloss over them and go, oh, but Moses, he was such a great guy, and yeah, so filled with faith, and I'll never be like Moses. Don't try to compare me to Moses, right? Said that he left the treasures of Egypt. Let's talk about that for a minute. The treasures of Egypt. Now, what we know what that might be like. So King Tutankhamun was from the same era as the Ramses era, right? And so we know from what we've found with King Tut's tomb is that they get buried with all their stuff. They're the original ones that wanted to take it with them. And so King Tut was related to kind of the Ramses family. Now, in 1922, explorer Howard Carter discovered King Tut's tomb pretty much intact. Everything was gold, and they found everything that you would have lived for normal life was there. The Egyptians, like I said, tried to take it with them. So when Moses left the treasures, in there they found all these treasures. Show that next picture. All these treasures, everything that he lived, even to golden slippers that he had. And he had everything there. And this is the treasure. When it says that Moses left the treasures of it, all this stuff that you see, this type of stuff, that was going to be Moses. He was the prince of Egypt, and this is what he left. You know, there's probably no one living today that lived like this, that had this much stuff, this much gold. And he leaves this, and he chooses to be identified with the poorest of the poor. So we're talking about a crisis right now that he went through, but also embedded in these scriptures, we're going to look at how he did that. All this leads to the third crisis, and that's total rejection. Total rejection. Just take a minute just to imagine that. Imagine that he's living, with the upper crust of society, and he leaves all of that. How do you think they looked at him? Probably looked at him with disgust, right? I can't believe you. No, you know what's interesting? I was reading this. I was thinking about Brenton Brock and other, it doesn't have to be missionaries. It could be people that are in the military service and so forth. But there's a term that they use for people that lived like Brenton Brock lived. That's called third culture kids. And the longer they stay, the harder it is. Third culture kid is this. They leave their home culture. Right? So imagine this with Moses. They leave their home culture for another culture, right? And when they get that other culture, they're never really accepted in that other culture because they're not from that culture. And then when they leave that and come home, now they're so different because of their experiences living abroad and experience everything that they have and seeing the world so much bigger. When they come home, they're different and they're not accepted even in their home culture. And it's difficult. It was very difficult for Brent and Brock when we came home to assimilate into this culture. Now they're just normal American boys, but they still have that in them, right? And so they call these people third culture kids. So I was thinking about that when I was thinking about Moses. Because Moses, right, he goes to his people, and you know the stories, like all kind of stuff happens, right? He's 40 years old, and his people are these slaves, and he wants to try to help them, right? He's thinking, wow, everything that I came from, everything that I am, I want to try to help my people. And so at one time he sees a Hebrew being beaten by an Egyptian, right? You remember that? And he actually stops it, but he actually kills the Egyptian. And then he hides the Egyptian, and the story goes on. Then later on he sees two Hebrews fighting. And he goes and stops that. He goes, what are you guys doing? And he tries to stop that. And one of them looks at him, hey, aren't you the one who killed the Egyptian? And now he's terrified, right? And so he's going through this crisis of, I'm not accepted here. They've rejected me. I go to my own people. They don't want me. Like, who am I? He goes through this huge, huge identity crisis and then total rejection. Moses is like, what am I going to do? Everyone knows what I did, right? The Hebrews don't want me. Listen to this. This is an important side note for this, okay? In his zeal, and I've seen this a lot, in his zeal, he forgot. He wanted to do God's will. Isn't that right? He wanted to do a good thing and do God's will. But in his zeal, he forgot to do God's will, God's way, and in God's time. It's very important. Very important to get these things right. In the book of James, listen to this. James 1:20, it says this. Because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Like, I see people oftentimes with a lot of passion, a lot of zeal, want to tell somebody about their faith, and they just do it bad. Have you ever seen this? Like, they end up arguing and fighting, and all it does is put somebody on the defensive and builds walls, and that's not what it's about. Like, if you look at Jesus' life, he never did that. You know what Jesus did? Jesus loved people. He took care of people. That's what he did. He never argued. I think sometimes, and this is my own opinion now, but I think sometimes people try to convince other people of their beliefs, and they're not really trying to convince them. You know who they're trying to convince? Themselves. Thank you, Lionel. No, that's true. It is true. When I see that, I think, wow, it's them who, right? It's also, too, I've seen where ministers and pastors or whatever will get on some soapbox on a certain issue, and they just beat it all the time, and I think, you know what? That's his issue. That's why he's on it so much. And so when people try to do that, right, and they just cause division rather than just simply loving people and helping people. Now, so Moses is old, right? And he's trying to do the right thing. Now, here's a question to ask yourself. Ask yourself this: do I want to be right? Because I want to be right all the time. So I put this in here. I put a star by it here because this is so me. Do I want to be right, or do I want to be righteous? Do I want to be righteous? Do you try to win an argument, or do you do what you can to stay in relationship? Don't raise your hand, right? Are you trying to win to be right? Or do you think, you know what? There's something more important than that. I want to be righteous. I want to stay in relationship. And this takes being gentle and humble. And see, Moses had to learn this. As a matter of fact, later, we see in Numbers 12:3, it said that he was the most humble man on earth. But it wasn't right away, was it? It's something he had to learn. He didn't start that way. He learned it after, you ready for this? He learned after 40 years in exile. 40 years. Before he was called the most humble man on earth.
Who would you like to call?
Nobody. Not right now. So, you know the story. God calls him, God speaks to him in a burning bush. We see that in Exodus. And you'd think that right then that he would be just, after that he was all in and faith and everything. But no, it's not. Moses says this. He calls him and tells him what to do. And Moses, you think God talked to him and goes, yeah. And then he goes, no thanks. I don't think so. And I know what you're thinking right now. How could he say no to God? We all do it, don't we? You ever been out somewhere kind of doing something and somehow you feel, you don't even know what it is, but you feel impressed to go talk to somebody or help somebody, and right? I've always told the story, I've told so many times in here where people came up front for prayer for things, and I was a pastor in this church, and I was sitting in the front row, and this woman was there, and I said, God, what does she need? What does she want? Like, why is she up here? She wants prayer for something. And into my head came, pray for her feet. And I said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I'm not praying for her feet. Really, God, what is it that she needs that I could pray for? Pray for her feet. I am not praying for her feet. I'm going to go up there and pray for her feet, and she's going to say, oh, Sonny, he's an older lady, get up. It's not my feet, it's my shoulder or something, whatever, you know what I'm saying? And then, most humbling thing, another pastor walked up and whispered in her ear, and she whispered back, and he got down on his knees, he laid his hands on her feet, and he prayed for her feet. I understand Moses, right? You hear and you go, that can't be right. Not me. That's my thinking. There's no way. And he said, no. But finally, after learning all that he learned, things began to kind of come together a little bit for him, right? And things began to be better and better and better. Isn't that right? No, that's not right. The next thing is he had worsening trials. They got worse for him. He goes back to his stepbrother, right? You know the story. And he says, God sent me here and, let my people go. And it doesn't get better. Things go worse. Matter of fact, it turns into a nightmare. You know the movie, if you haven't read the book. The plagues, all the insects and all the climate disaster winding up in a plague of death. But it says this, it says, by faith, he kept the Passover, the application of blood over the doorpost. You know the story. To kill the destroyer of the firstborn, would not touch the firstborn of Israel. And then finally they get out of Egypt. Christ is averted, right? And finally they're free. Now everything is going smooth, right? Now they're out of Israel. All that's behind them. They're out there. They're free. Now it's home sailing, right? No. The last crisis is this. He faces impossible problems. They find themselves trapped, powerless. The greatest power on earth is behind them, chasing them. The Red Sea is in front of them. And there's no hope. And not only is the firstborn of Israel going to die, all the Israelites are going to die. So how did they respond to this? They said to Moses, listen what they said to Moses, Exodus 14:11. Was it because there were no graves in Egypt? Now this is actually a comical thing, because graves in Egypt were plentiful. They were all over the place. They say, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? Now, can you imagine this is what they're saying to Moses? Moses has been through all this. His life has been, turned upside down. Right? Crisis in childhood. He's identity crisis. He's not the son of Pharaoh, and he's these slaves, and they don't accept him, and on and on. And now they're saying to him, you'd think that by this time things would be going great. And it's not. And they say, didn't we say in Egypt, leave us alone. Let us serve the Egyptians. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. Can you see why these Hebrews now in the New Testament that are facing difficult times and want to quit, that this story is so relevant to them? They're listening to this, they're going, oh yeah, okay. It's not just us, right? It's not just us. And so sometimes we can do what is right and things can still go wrong. Because sometimes we get this idea that, like, if I just make an effort and go to church, then everything's going to go well, right? I'm going to go to rehab, I'm going to go through, then everything's going to be good, right? Okay, let's go to counseling and let's work this through, and we'll go to counseling, and after that, everything's going to be good. Is that the way things happen? Oftentimes what happens? It gets worse, doesn't it? It gets worse. And that's what happened here. Things got worse and worse and worse for Moses. Now, what I want to look at now is this. So if all that's true about Moses, and this is what's happening to the Hebrews, who the author is writing to after waiting some 30, 40 years, right? Things are getting so bad. So now let's look at the same text, the same scriptures. So how did he do it? How did he endure? How can we, right, endure in our faith in the times that we're going through right now? Now, look, to be clear, there are times when Moses really, 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 really wanted to quit. And Moses pretty much told God that. Listen to this. He said this, "Why are you doing this to me?" So he said, "Why are you doing this to me? What have I done to deserve this?" Anybody? Maybe you haven't said it to God. Have you ever thought that? Thought, God, what? Like, why me? Why am I going through this? Here, all I'm trying to do is I'm trying to serve you. I'm trying to live my life right. I'm trying to do the right thing. Why are you doing this to me? What have I done to deserve this? You've made me responsible for all these people, and they're not even my children. Look what he says next. Did I conceive these people? Did I give them birth? So why do you tell me to carry them in my arms as a nurse carries an infant? Then Moses concludes like this. This job is too much for me. How can I take care of these people by myself? If this is the way you're going to treat me, just kill me now and end my miserable life. This is our great hero of faith. This is him. See, I think this is here. You know, if you're going to create your own religion, and you were going to write something about that religion, you know what you would do? You would make it sound like the best ever. Like when you choose that religion, everything's going to be great. It's going to be, man, you're going to have power, you're going to have victory. And that's the way it's going to be. That's how we would write it. But you know why it's written like this? Because this is the truth. It's simply the truth. And so Moses endures this difficult life. This job is too much for me, he says. How can I take care of these people by myself? If this is the way you're going to treat me, just kill me now and end my miserable life. Faith does not mean that you always feel the good feelings. It means you endure in spite of your feelings. You know, we'll talk about this, but endurance has so much to do with your thoughts. Remember we just did a whole series on transformation, right? Remember that? Like an 18-part series about how to be transformed. I don't know if you listened to that, I don't know if you took notes on that, if you're trying to do that. But you know, life gets busy and life gets difficult, and sometimes we forget. And so I was remembering this morning, listen to this. Do you know that there are kids in here? There are kids in here. Okay, so you know, in a marital relationship, you know, with a husband and wife, when they're together, dopamine levels can double in the brain. You know, dopamine is a feel-good chemical, right? Makes you feel good. Doubles in the brain. Cocaine can go 2.5 times to 3 times the levels of dopamine in the brain. Cocaine. That's why it's so addicting, right? So, but the thing is, the problem with that is then afterwards you crash. So I know I talked about this before, but I'll mention to you again. A cold shower in the morning, cold shower, can raise your dopamine levels to 2 to 3 times their normal level. But you don't crash after, like with cocaine. It can stay up for 3 to 5 hours. I've been telling Pete for the last couple months, right? I go, this is what I've been saying. Listen to me, this is what I've been saying. God, it's so cold. I can't take the cold. I hate the cold. That's what I've been telling myself. I thought, why don't I keep telling myself that? And I look around, this guy Wim Hof, they call him the Iceman. He puts himself in ice water, and you know, Steve has a friend who takes a cold shower every morning, right? I think, you know what? It's not the body. The body can take it, obviously. Our bodies are the same, aren't they? Aren't our bodies the same? They're made of the same stuff. So if one body can take it and one body can't take it, where's the problem? The problem's here. And I got to thinking, I'm telling myself, yeah, the reason why I can't take the cold is I keep telling myself, I can't take the cold. I can't take it. So this morning I took a cold shower. And it was terrible. No, I loved it. It was so good. Wow. It was. But anyways, I don't know why I got on that. Let's talk about, I guess, because it's all part of your thought processes, isn't it? So here's the thing. How did he do it? How did Moses do it? Well, he chose to focus. Focus what? Focus his thoughts. Focus his thoughts on three things. I'm just going to go through them real quick, okay? Because they're not hard. They're not difficult. Just write them down. You could elaborate on them yourself. But number one, he chose to focus on long-term gain. Long-term gain. You know, in our culture, in our society, listen, we've got to break out of this instant gratification stuff, don't we? We've got to just stop this. It's craziness. All you do is get yourself in trouble. Financial trouble, right? Emotional trouble, wanting things like right away. Relationship trouble. Like we do not want in our society, for some reason, delayed gratification. How many are old enough when you were young, you'd go down to Kmart and you'd pick something out and you'd give them $3 and they'd put it in the back room and every week you'd go down there and you'd give them some more money. Layaway. Now we get it first, then we pay for it later. Like we don't want to wait for anything. And so long-term gain, listen to this. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ of greater value. Now, regarded, though, is an important word there. Regard is actually a weak, when we translate that word to regard, it's actually a weak translation. It's actually more of a financial sort of analysis. It should be a word more like, what would be a word? Who's financial people in here? You guys, Dale, you're a financial person. What do you do when you assess your finances, right? Maybe that's not the right word. Anyway, what is it? Yeah, evaluate, you assess. So it's a stronger word, like when you're looking at your finances, right? It's kind of like, think of it maybe like an accounting term. And so he weighed them, and what he did is, so it's not like he just thought about, well, maybe that's better, right? He's looking at them. Did you ever take a piece of paper and write and go, pros on this side, cons on this side, right? It's kind of what he's doing here. He's looking, he's saying, listen, all the things of Egypt, all the treasures of Egypt, he looked at all those things, right? Like all that gold and arrow, the life he was going to live. And he assessed it and he said, no, he regarded Christ as of greater value. Isn't it true that all of life is a trade-off? Wouldn't you agree with that? All of life's a trade-off. Like you chose to be here as opposed to where? Or anywhere. It's a trade-off. You said, well, I'm going to go there as opposed to staying home, watching online, or going out for breakfast. All of life is a trade-off. Everything you choose to do at any moment in time, you could be doing something else. And you need to ask yourself always this, is this trade-off worth it? Is it worth it? Is it worth it to forsake, the Bible says, don't forsake the coming together as a body of believers, because it's good for us, right? So you need to assess, is it, hear me now, I'm not trying to step on any toes, okay? You ask yourself, what's of greater value for your life? I'm just kind of tired of staying home. It'd be good to watch on TV or just sleep in, right? You need to assess it and go, is that better for me? Is that better for me than coming and being part of something like this, where we sit and we hear, we worship together, we listen to a message together, we fellowship together, we talk about, right? And so you need to assess it. You need to weigh that and think, what is the long-term gain? Is it worth it? When Moses did this, he concluded that in the short term, absolutely the treasures of Egypt are better. No question, right? No question. But in the long term, following God's way is much more worth it. And everybody, we all do this, don't we? You know when we do it, unfortunately? Let me tell you when we do it. You guys know, right? When we do this, when we do assessment. When we're dying. When we're dying, we go, I should have. can't believe I didn't spend more time with my family. Why didn't I live my life? Why didn't I take my relationship with God more seriously? Right? That's when we do this assessment. But we can do it sooner. We can do it now. Okay, secondly is this. Secondly, he had a long-range perspective. It says he was looking forward to his reward. Tony Evans, listen to this. Tony Evans is a pastor. If I tell you of somebody that I like or a book that I read, doesn't mean that I agree with everything, right? Does that make sense? Like I read oftentimes books that I don't agree with, and they could be great books. And I don't agree with them because I want to be challenged. I don't want to just always read something or listen to somebody that I go and go, yep, I believe that. Yep, I believe that. Yep, I believe that. Yep, I believe that. Right? I want somebody to challenge my way of thinking. So Tony Evans, I like Tony Evans. I don't agree with everything he says, but that's okay. I can still like somebody. Tony Evans was married for 49 years until, this was about 2 years ago, I think. His wife Lois passed away after a long illness. Listen, the last thing she said was that she was in bed for about 2 weeks, couldn't talk, right? She was just, you know how it is at the end of life like that sometimes. And she said this. All of a sudden, she kind of woke up in a lucid moment, and she said, my reward. They're going to give me my reward. Like he says, clear as a bell. Clear as a bell. And then soon after that, she passed. Jesus said it like this. Jesus talking about, live the life now, because the life now is actually, you can experience the reward even now. Jesus said, I've come that you might have life in its most abundant form. He said it like this. Seek ye first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. What things? It's not material things. That's what Moses left. Moses said, listen, I regard all this other stuff way better than material stuff. Is there anything wrong with material stuff? No. But if you're putting your hope in material things for happiness and for your peace of mind, listen, they're not in that. And that's what Moses said. I regarded Christ to be better. So long-term gain, long-term perspective. I want the band to come up right now. The last one is this. The last one is long-lasting power. He focused on the Creator. Said this, he persevered because he saw him who was invisible. Now, what does that mean? How can you see something that's invisible, right? Because we're thinking, see with his eyes. No, he was simply doing this. He was simply reminding himself of who God is. Guys, you come on up. I read something recently. Let me read it to you. A pastor said this. I feel like what's happened in the eyes of many Christians over the past 2 years is that Jesus has gotten smaller. COVID has gotten bigger. Social ills got bigger. Politics got bigger. And Jesus got smaller. So we need to remember, we have problems. We may even have big problems, right? Right? That's true. That's okay. It's okay to be honest with things. But Jesus is still bigger. So let me ask you this. What's going to grow? What's going to grow in your imagination? What's going to grow is what you think about. So let me ask you a couple questions. What do you find the majority of your life? What are you talking about with other people? Think about that. What are you talking about? What are you thinking about? What are you reading about? What are you scrolling about? What are you watching? What are you listening to? Because let me tell you something, friends. That's what's going to grow bigger in your life. It's not rocket science, is it? It's not. And this is for you, each of you individually. Ask yourself, because I've been asking myself that question. Like I know, I'm there too. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Listen, let me tell you one last thing. I found this. So in 2019, listen to this. This blows my mind. 2019, there was a Facebook leak to the MIT Technical Journal, where an internal study revealed. You with me now? Listen. 19 of the top Christian Facebook pages. You're scrolling? Oh, this is a great Facebook page. It's a Christian page. Look at that article. I can't believe it. What do? You end up sending it to everybody you know, right? Anybody? Come on, be honest, right? That's what we do. Listen, this is Christian. We send it. So listen, this is internal. They discovered this. 19 of the top Christian Facebook pages was not run by Christians or churches at all. They were run by Eastern European troll farms. So friends, all I'm trying to say is this. I'm not saying don't be informed. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying put your head in the sand. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this. What's the majority of your thought life doing? What do you spend it doing? Do you spend it on things that are of greater value? Or do you just get caught up in that downward spiral? I want to encourage you to start thinking this way. You want to endure, have a long range, look at the long range gain and perspective, and remember the power that is in Christ. Okay? So I'm going to close in prayer. I'll just let Michelle close in prayer, or Lydia close in prayer after it's over the song, okay? This is a great song. If you can sit and listen to it, by all means do that. If you can't, then stand up and let's get at it.